coach, and strategist, empowering, educating, inspiring, and igniting people like you to take action with Jet Propulsion. We're very excited to have today on our show Jackie Cara, who's going to tell us all about, yes, the subject is guardianship, something near and dear to my heart. Also something that is coming up a lot, apparently, when Jackie's out in the world and helping all these people. Jackie Cara has been here before. She's an estate planning attorney. She helps families with special needs children to make sure their children are provided for and protected throughout their lives. She also helps families dealing with issues of addiction and mental illness with strategies to help their loved ones. And I have to tell you, Jackie is so compassionate and so easy to work for that when you're in these times of stress to make these decisions, you want Jackie to be with you because she has that compassion and she has an understanding that others I don't frequently see. She frequently assists families with Medicaid eligibility for long-term care needs, plans for the future, and ensures the right people are making their most important decisions. Welcome to the show. I should say welcome back to the show, Jackie Cara.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me back, Lori. It's great to see you.
Oh, it's good to see you too, and always interesting conversation. So I'm so excited about today. Jackie, I mentioned that we were talking about guardianship. I know I had personal experience with guardianship. I have a sister with special needs, and I wasn't going to tell the story, but I am going to tell the story. And my sister, my father had prepared for a guardianship for all the siblings to take care of our sister. We were all well aware of it. When my father passed, we were told at that time that guardianship no longer was valid because somewhere along the line they changed the rules and they changed the laws. So that means we had to go through the process all over again. And it wasn't an easy process back when my father did it when my sister was young, but it was even more, we'll say, challenging for us to actually be guardians. We wanted to be guardians for our sister, and believe it or not, the company or the organization that my sister was housed with was actually fighting us for guardianship because they wanted the SSI checks from the government. And I say that quite frankly because that's exactly what happened. Long story short, we ended up winning back our guardianship. The state and the courts prefer to have family members involved in their family members' lives, which is a wonderful thing. But without the process of guardianship, I would have had no say in what was happening with my sister. And so let's talk about the whys, the what's, the five letters here of why we should have guardianships and what gets us to the point and who should have them. So let's unravel this mess of a guardianship.
Okay. So, as I said to you before we started, for some reason, guardianship's been coming up a lot in my practice lately. So I thought it was a good topic to talk about. You know, it's a little bit of a niche area. Not a lot of people understand guardianship or what's involved. So I thought it was a good
That's
thing
for
to talk
sure.
about. You know, I usually talk about powers of attorney and healthcare proxies, and everybody talks about that. So
And trust.
and trust. And so guardianship's a little bit different. And maybe guardianship is one of the more important things to talk about because
Yeah.
people don't know that it's an option that's available to them sometimes. They don't quite know what they're getting into when they actually try to become guardians. And, you know, it's a very nuanced area of the law. So people don't always completely understand what's going on with a guardianship.
Yeah. So what is a guardianship?
So a guardianship here in New York, you might hear it called a conservatorship. If you followed the Britney Spears story at all, you heard it called a conservatorship, but it's the same thing. So in New York, what a guardianship is somebody stepping in to take care of somebody who is incapacitated, right? And commonly that's a parent with a disabled child. Also commonly it's a parent with an adult disabled child, maybe from mental or physical illness or from a drug addiction or something along those lines. And then frequently it's older children taking care of their parents.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And how do I know at when's the right time to become a guardian?
So that's, you know, I'll start at the easy spectrum and I'll go to the hard spectrum. So where it's an easy end of the spectrum is when you have a child who has developmental delays or a traumatic brain injury, or they're on the autism spectrum, things of that nature, where you know when your child turns 18 they are going to continue to need your support as a parent.
Correct.
For some kids, that's a lifetime of very significant support. And for other kids, it's maybe a little assistance. It's maybe a little foundation and assistance. So a very common scenario that comes up in my practice are parents contacting me. They have special needs children. Their children are turning 18, and they realize, oh goodness, I'm not going to be able to go to the doctor anymore. I'm not going to be able to call the doctor anymore. I'm not going to be able to manage whatever income is coming in, whether it's from Social Security or some disability payment or something like that. So at 18, they get all the rights that everybody else has, and they may not be ready for them. So that's sort of the easy end of the spectrum. You sort of know that when you see it, you've hopefully been prepared for it.
That's like my sister. My sister, she will always have a 5-year-old IQ, so to speak.
Right.
So she doesn't have the capacity to take care of all of those things. But
Exactly.
thankfully, we had a father who thought of this when she was very young, and they had guardianship of my sister when she was, I want to say 5 or 6 years old.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
as a parent, you have legal guardianship over your child. So all of those decisions you're entitled to make as a parent, or as a legal guardian through some other process, whether you're an adoptive parent or there's been a death in the family, but the legal guardianship is there.
But my
Um,
parents did that because just in case something
yes,
happened to them, what would happen to my sister Beth? And so
very, very smart.
I thought that was smart, even though they had the legal guardianship because they were the parents. And also they kept my sister when back in the day when people typically
Right.
didn't go to developmental centers. My parents were extraordinary human beings and they kept her. And he did this to make it easy for that transfer to us as now I'm her younger sister, but I have two older brothers. And so, they made it easier when it was going to be a difficult time. God forbid something happened to our parents. So, that's the easy side of the spectrum. Okay, let's take a trip over to the other side of the
We could
spectrum.
tip over to the other side of the spectrum. So, I mean, on the other side of the easy spectrum, right, are parents who've never planned and they've become dementia or Alzheimer's is the big ticket here is, when you've noticed that your parents are no longer able to pay their bills. They're no longer able to fill their prescriptions. They're really not functioning as independent adults. And this is definitely a tricky gray area is when does that happen? But it's usually a crisis or an emergency comes up.
Yeah.
And there's a diagnosis of dementia or Alzheimer's, and the parent really no longer has the capacity to make medical decisions and pay their bills. So that's the other end of maybe the easy but grayer spectrum is when a parent has dementia, but they haven't signed a power of attorney or a healthcare proxy, and now something needs to be done. And you
Yeah.
have children with no authority to act on their behalf. Often they are required to bring a guardianship proceeding so that they can get the authority to apply for Medicaid, pay everyday bills, take in income, and make sure their parents get to the right doctors on time.
Yeah.
It's sort of the other end of the spectrum where it's not so sticky.
How long does a guardianship process take typically?
So there are two kinds in New York. There's one through the surrogates court and there's one through the Supreme Court. The one through the surrogates court is very often the one we do when we have that disabled child turning 18, because the one in surrogates court is very medical heavy. Right? If we move for guardianship in surrogates court, we're asking the court to really rely on papers to decide whether a guardianship is necessary. And that's all supported by medical care providers. And they have very stringent rules about what has to be in those medical providers' affidavits. And there's very detailed information given to the court, but it's very much based on paper, pre-existing medical evidence, and doctor's testimony. The other guardianship is the Supreme Court guardianship, and that guardianship is for the maybe cases where we maybe don't have the medical documentation to support the guardianship. Maybe it's based on behavior we're seeing. Maybe it's based on poor decision making we're watching. Maybe it's based on the parent that now is, going to the grocery store to pay their electric bill or something along those lines, where you're seeing behavior, but you don't necessarily have doctors who can give testimony to really back up the need for a guardianship.
How does that not get subjective? Like who makes
It's
that?
very subjective.
Yeah. Who gets to make that choice?
The judge. So,
Yeah.
so in an Article 81 guardianship, which is the Supreme Court guardianship, right? That's maybe that's a little bit more of the interesting process. The hearing is supposed to be done within 30 days, and the courts really try to stick with that.
30
But
days of what?
30 days of the date that you file your petition asking the court to intervene.
Okay.
So in those instances, the hearing might be held in 30 days or not too long after that, but the process of going through the paperwork and getting the order written and filed and getting all the authority you need becomes a little bit like a probate proceeding. We're waiting for the court, we're waiting on, so even if the court has heard the case and issued the directive, sometimes the paperwork. So I tell people 3 to 6 months.
Wow.
Right. And you can move for an emergency guardianship if you have somebody who's really in danger. That can change and be sped up. But those are the guardianships that get really interesting because, like you said, it's very subjective.
Yeah, yeah, because like one person's claiming something and the parent might not agree with it because they can't see it. I just want to go back to something you said in emergency guardianship about how long does an emergency guardianship take if the regular one takes 3 to 6 months.
So you can get a temporary emergency guardianship that can be issued right away.
Okay.
And that's something that you do when somebody's really in danger.
Okay.
They're found wandering, there's nobody at home, there's no care in place. You can get a more emergent guardianship order, and that would be temporary to solve a particular problem.
Yeah. So going back to that Supreme Court justice who, is going to make best efforts and best decisions and how does gosh, that's a lot of responsibility. How do they make that decision? Like what's the baseline for making that decision?
So there's a lot of guardrails in those Supreme Court guardianships. I mean, there are a lot of guardrails in the other one too, but they're very delineated. There's a lot of documentary evidence. In these guardianships, there are guardrails put in place to help the judge make that decision. So one of the guardrails is something called a court evaluator. Whenever the court receives that petition asking the court to intervene, they appoint somebody called a court evaluator. And that person is basically the eyes and ears of the court. It's that person's job to go out in the field and conduct an investigation. So they would talk to me, they would talk to the person I'm saying is incapacitated, they would talk to the people who want to be guardian, they would talk to doctors, or if somebody's in a facility, they would talk to their nurses and staff and their neighbors and investigate their bank accounts and things like that to try to look for evidence of what we're claiming is the problem. They're also looking for very specific evidence of, it's all about activities of daily living. Like what things is this person not able to do?
Right.
Wandering is a great one. Their fridge is filled with rotten food. They're dehydrated. They're, lacking proper nutrition because they can no longer cook or shop. These are very specific examples of things that the court looks for.
Or basic things like washing themselves, taking care of themselves, things like that.
Exactly. If they start to see that a mortgage is in arrears or taxes aren't being paid, or, they're going to the bank and withdrawing money every day, and things like that. Those are very specific examples of things the court might look for. The court also frequently appoints counsel for the person. So it's a person alleged to be incapacitated. So that person that is the subject of concern often has counsel appointed for them.
So even if they have children and stuff like that, counsel would be appointed to the parent.
Not in every case, but in many cases, especially if the judge senses there's some, I don't know, elder abuse. There's a lot of money. Remember, we talked before about where there's fighting, there's money. Where there are, maybe some allegations, Adult Protective Services has become involved, or the court evaluator rather looks at the case and says, something doesn't sit right with me. I think we need counsel here.
Yeah, that makes sense. I know that sometimes people think there's value where there is none. And so they have this misperception, and then that goes to accusations of hiding things, or I've heard many stories about that as well. It must make it very challenging for you. What about doing guardianships is appealing to you? Because I know, again, I know you're a very compassionate individual, but why does it appeal to you? Is it a challenge? Is it making sure that they're taken care of? Is it a combination?
So it's a very small bar. The group of attorneys that frequently do guardianship and do it well, and the group of judges that are assigned to these cases, because this is one area where judges may not move on the way judges typically do. Judges work on a rotation and they go through different parts and areas of law, but guardianship judges often stay in that seat for a longer period of time. So it's a pretty small community of people that do this kind of work. And I will say, in 80% of cases, everybody is there for the best interest of the person we're talking about.
Right.
So there's a lot of collegiality, camaraderie, working together, forming a team, even though it's litigation and you might be quote unquote opposing parties. In a well done guardianship where the right interests are at heart, everybody on the team is working towards the same goal.
Right. Yeah. It's so working towards the same goal is important, but asking questions is the important thing
Yes.
about each person on the team is like, well, let's make sure we ask these questions and things come to mind. It's not personal either, and you can't
Right.
take it personal. It's not an
No,
attack
you
on
can't.
you to be asked a question. It's clarity, making sure we're all doing the right thing for the individual, right?
Yes. And part of the challenge, I think, is that it's a very big civil rights issue to bring a guardianship.
Yeah.
You know, in a power of attorney, when somebody appoints their child to be their power of attorney, they can still go to the bank and do all of the things they've given the power to their child to do. So my child can go to the bank, but so can I. My child can register my car, but so can I. So we're not
Right.
taking power away. In a guardianship, we're taking power away. So
Yeah.
if a guardian is given the authority to go to the bank, that incapacitated person may no longer have the ability to go to the bank. So we're really taking civil rights away, very basic the ability to choose your home, the ability to choose who takes care of you. Like, these are very basic rights that we're taking away from somebody. So to me, it's a very serious matter. And I think that's part of what always appealed to me as well.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. It's a very serious matter. Now, you said something that I'm not going to let slide. You said 80% of the time. What about the 20% of the time?
Well, those are the interesting cases, right? Those are the Britney Spears cases and the
Oh,
so so 20% of the time we have some form of contested issue in a guardianship. And my first question when somebody comes to me with a contested guardianship is, where's the money? Because in 80% of those cases, I would say, in 20% of those cases, I would say 18% of them are being contested because there's money.
hmm.
So I've worked on guardianships with people I had a guardianship with a woman had $25 million and an apartment on the Upper East Side. And a guardianship was brought, which was probably necessary. Like, she was probably at a point in her life where she was incapacitated and couldn't take care of herself. But because there was so much money involved, there must have been 10 lawyers involved in the case.
Oh my gosh.
And every issue in the case was heavily litigated, and everybody wanted an outcome. And almost none of those outcomes were for her best interest.
Oh,
They were all, for the most part, the parties were in the case because, where's my piece? How am I going to get paid?
wow.
Are we saving for the beneficiaries rather than spending the money on her? So that's an extreme case because there was so much money.
Yeah.
But my first question is always, where's the money that people are interested in getting to?
Yeah. And how did that end? Was it a happy ending and she was taken care of properly? And
She was taken care of properly in the end, and she was allowed to stay in her very nice Upper East Side apartment. And, you know, some of the things sometimes in guardianship that people are trying to control are things that we really need to let people do.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
she enjoyed, this is what triggered the guardianship actually, was she enjoyed walking around the neighborhood and she was lonely. And she would go, she lived on the Upper East Side. You can walk downstairs and there's a Dunkin' Donuts and a cafe and this. And she would go every day to these places. And she would pretend she didn't have any money. But she had plenty of money. But this she still needed to be allowed to socialize. This is, you know,
Well, it's important. You know, you take that away, somebody
yeah,
you just shorten their lifespan. You know, it's like moving elders too. You got to be careful when you do that because sometimes you shorten their lifespan. Most cases
absolutely.
you don't. You know, it's a better scenario hopefully, but sometimes you do because there's mindset involved in that, and depression could kick in, and then like they give up the will to live, and so there are certain remedies to everything and certain things that we have to consider, and that's what you get to do. We're going to take a short break. You're listening to Healthy Lifestyle with Lorianne on JVC Broadcasting and iHeartRadio. We're going to come back with the great Jackie Cara, continue conversations of guardianship and what you should know, what you shouldn't know, and what you should do or shouldn't do. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Healthy Lifestyle with Lorianne. I am Coach Lorianne, America's #1 tech action success coach and strategist. We are here with the great Jackie Cara. We are talking about circuit court, Supreme Court, and guardianships. You know, we left off with that 20% of really yummy protection things that you all work with when you're doing guardianships. And I love the fact that it's a very specific area of law so that the judges stay in it. I think that's better that you have a judge who has a lot of history behind them.
Yes.
I think informed means better choices. Would that be a good articulation of that?
So, yes, the judges that I work with in the guardianship parts are judges who have become extremely knowledgeable about the nuances of the law and the special needs of the population we're trying to serve, right? So occasionally a new judge comes in if a judge retires or a new judge gets assigned, and it's such a different area of law and there's such a steep learning curve. So it's very challenging when a new judge or an attorney who's never handled a guardianship comes in, because it really is such a nuanced, distinct area of law.
Yeah, I'm sure. And there's a lot of variables. There's so many variables involved with it. I can't only imagine. Who can be a guardian?
So typically the judge wants to see a family member. Like they really will go out of their way to have a family member, at least as the personal needs guardian. So when you have a guardianship, you have two parts. You have the personal needs, which is like it sounds, right? You're responsible for the personal needs. You're the one doing the doctor's appointments and the prescriptions and finding the care providers and, you know, making sure the groceries are bought and all of that stuff, the personal needs. And then there's the property management side, and that's the person who's responsible for the money. So, you know, usually it's the same person. In most cases, that's the same person. And in most cases, it's a parent and then often a sibling. And that's what the court prefers to see. Who better equipped to provide such intimate needs to this individual that we all care about than, you know, somebody who really loves them.
Yeah, yeah. You would think that a loved one would have the best interest, but I'm sure there are those cases where they don't have the best
They,
interest.
they don't. So who else can be a guardian? I've been a guardian when there's been nobody else able to be a guardian. I've been guardian of personal needs, guardian of property management. Um, Guardian of property management, in some regards, it's a little bit easier because dealing with the day-to-day needs of somebody who's incapacitated is very challenging. There are a lot of us that act as guardians, that small community I was talking about before. Most of us wear all of the hats. Most of us will both represent the family bringing the guardianship, will act as guardian in some instances, will be that court evaluator or be that counsel for the incapacitated or alleged incapacitated person. Most of us at some time or another have had all of those jobs.
But
So,
not for the same people.
not for the same people,
Yeah,
no.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Cases.
That would be a
Um,
conflict.
so most of us have a pretty good understanding of the whole spectrum of what goes into representing somebody in these cases. So
Yeah.
you'll see lawyers as guardians, you'll see social workers as guardians, you'll see other care providers as guardians, but the court really, really likes to see family members.
For the purposes of the fact that you would think that they would have the best interests.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I love the fact that you have all that experience and you understand the process and what each role carries by having held it,
Yeah.
having, actually executed that role. I love that. It goes back to what my dad told me years ago. If you want to be a good CEO, start in your warehouse. Know
Yeah.
know everything that everybody does in the different departments. So when you're sitting in your cushy little office, that you're making decisions that are informed decisions on they can actually carry out or not carry out. So I think that's really great. And when you're helping people determine whether or not they're going to be a guardian, you can actually explain clearly what their jobs really are. Because a lot of times it's like, yeah, okay, I'll be a guardian. What does that mean?
Exactly.
What are my responsibilities? And is it 24/7? Does it become a full-time job?
It has. I have had guardianships where it's been a very, very stressful full-time job. There are, I was guardian of a woman who had a very serious alcohol, substance abuse, and mental illness issue, and she was in the community. So I became responsible for helping her find alternative housing. She was constantly being evicted. We were trying to secure her some sort of assistive housing or assistive living, which was very challenging. So that was certainly a full-time and very stressful and really very sad role as a guardian. I've often been guardians for people who are in nursing homes or assisted living facilities and don't have anybody to help make medical decisions.
I was going to ask you about that. Like, what do you do with people who don't have family? There are people I know, they don't have any family.
Yeah, so those are people who end up with a guardianship with an attorney or social worker or somebody else who acts as guardian. There's a list. We have to be qualified, and there's, a list that judges choose from to choose
What
who would be the right guardian.
what makes you qualified?
You have to take a course and a test, and then you're on a list of a lot of people. And basically, over time, judges get to know people. And the really good judges seek
They,
out people with commonality.
yeah, they fit them together. Yeah.
Do. So the really good, really thoughtful, really experienced judges that they've gotten to know you over time and they try to match a woman with a woman. They try to match language or culture similarities. They try to match somebody who maybe in their personal life has an experience with somebody similar to the person they're trying to help. So
Yeah.
in the best world, you actually have a guardian that not just agrees to do the job and is qualified to do the job, but has something to offer the particular person.
Yeah. Oh, that's a wonderful process. So walk us through what's involved in a guardianship procedure. Like just bring us there. Bring us into one of your court sessions.
Okay.
What does that look like?
So I think probably the most interesting and maybe the most heart-wrenching cases are the cases with families who have an adult child with substance use issues or mental health issues, because those are they're really sticky. Like, where is the line between being entitled as an adult to make bad decisions and making
True.
bad decisions because you're truly not capable of taking care of yourself?
That's a good question.
So these are maybe the most fulfilling because I can actually provide some relief to families, but also the most challenging cases. So the process looks like this. It's usually the parents that come to me, and they describe a situation. Maybe they have a child who's recently been hospitalized, or maybe they have a child who's spending money and not able to pay their bills, and because they have a substance use or a mental illness, not just because they like to go shopping. But, there's something else going on. And the
Right.
parents will come to me and we'll sort of have a very long discussion about what a guardianship can achieve and what it can't achieve, because it's certainly not the end all and be all of solutions. And we'll start to put together a petition, which is the document that asks the court to intercede. So with those parents, it's a very personalized process where we sit down, we go through experiences, we go through things that have happened, we talk about the childhood of this person, we talk about what they've seen in terms of behavior, back to those activities of daily living, what are they able and unable to do? And we talk about what solutions a guardianship can actually provide. What can you as parents actually do? What are you hoping to get out of this? What can we actually solve here? And then we put together as a very big stack of papers with a very lengthy petition to the court laying all of this information out. And we file that, and the court signs it. They agree to take the petition. We have to serve everybody. We have to serve the person who we're bringing the guardianship about. And then we have a court proceeding. The judge will appoint that court evaluator, and that court evaluator will come and they'll interview the parents. They'll interview the person if the person will speak to them. They'll interview brothers and sisters and other family members and friends. They'll put together a report for the judge. And somewhere in there, they may say to the judge, I think this person needs an attorney, right? And an attorney may be appointed to represent that person's interest, even if they won't speak to the attorney. So we have like an intermediary there whose job is to say, you're pushing this too far. I don't think this is right, even if the person won't speak to them. There's somebody
Right. Well,
in their shoes
gotcha.
representing.
I just want to back you up for a second. You said that you serve the person who is probably going to lose some of their rights because of the situation. Who accepts on their behalf if they're not able to make decisions? How do they get served?
That's very tricky. So in a case like I'm talking about, right, we basically have to, I would coordinate with the parents. When is he home? When is she going to be around? Sometimes I'll go effectuate the service if I feel that'll be a softer, gentler way of doing it. I've done that with people so they'll get scared. I
Yeah.
want them to get scared.
Well,
You
so
know,
that languaging is very scary.
it's very scary. A stranger is coming and trying to hand you papers, and if you open the envelope, it's a very scary envelope. So, if I've gone sometimes myself and actually sat with the person and said, "This is what's happening, and this is the person who's going to help you. So this is who you should call." And that works out sometimes, and sometimes it doesn't, and you have to find a way to actually hand them the papers like you see in the movies, and you know, here, take this newspaper. Oh no, it's the papers. But we try. I think in this area of law, people are pretty mindful of not wanting to unnecessarily scare or startle the person you're trying to care about.
Yeah, because the person you're trying to care about probably doesn't believe that they have a problem in the first
Yeah.
place. And that's why they're kind of ratcheting out of control. Especially, I hear a lot of Oxycontin, oxycodone type of a situation where, they're just trying to save their lives, quite frankly, because they're
Right.
making bad choices, and it's because they have an addiction. And I believe that particular product rewires the brain. So after a while, I don't even know if they recognize the difference between making a good decision and a bad decision.
Oh, without a doubt. And then you see the comorbidity cases, right? Where you
And
have when you have a child maybe who has schizophrenia, but they're medicating themselves by taking drugs or drinking. So
yeah.
it's very hard. What's the chicken and what's the egg? What's really
Oh,
going on with this person? How do we get to the bottom of this so we can actually get them some help? And those are the most challenging cases because you have to
yeah.
figure out where to begin.
Yeah, where do you begin? And then the other challenging, I think, is when they don't want the help.
Yes.
And they're kind of running away from the help and they're like, I don't need this. And I know of a very close case to me where it's the same thing. They didn't see the need for the help. I don't need the help. I'm perfectly fine. So they sounded very lucid to an outsider, but you knew what all the actions were. So you need to put those actions and words together as a team
Yeah.
in order to really assess what the person does. Because especially on Oxycontin, oxycodone, they're very persuasive and they're very good at what they do. You know,
Yes.
so they even have professionals snowed. But if you take enough time with them, and I can't imagine how do you have that kind of substantial time to really get to know these people in order to make these judgments, you know?
So I think that's where sort of the guardrails come into the picture. We do have this evaluator who's coming in, and we do have counsel appointed for that person. There is a hearing. You know, Sometimes they don't show up, and that makes it harder. But sometimes when they do show up, you know, and they start talking to the judge sees what's really going on and sees that there's a need for care. And sometimes the judges say no. Sometimes the judges say no, this is an adult making adult decisions we wish they were not making, and I don't see the evidence here to justify having a guardian appointed.
Oh my God,
Sometimes
how does that feel when you're there
awful.
representing? Yeah,
Because when I'm representing parents specifically, right, and they're coming to me in this kind of a complicated scenario, they're desperate.
yeah,
They're desperately trying to help their child and
yeah,
find a way to provide some sort of assistance and,
yeah.
and help their child get better and not be in danger.
And
So
sometimes it doesn't end well if they don't
no,
get
so
help
so to
sooner.
have a court say no, we don't think a guardian is appropriate. Like, it's not even, the judge is not even saying we don't think he needs a guardian. They're saying it's just not the appropriate remedy. And that's heartbreaking.
Yeah. And what kind of alternatives do they have if they can't get the guardianship?
So we go back to the traditional, if you want to call it that, substance use disorder interventions.
Okay.
So, there are agencies that provide services around interventions. There are strategies. There are strategies that some people will recommend using to get a loved one hospitalized to make sure they're getting the care they need. With some families, they try so hard not to have that happen when really that may be the only chance is to have a loved one hospitalized.
Yeah.
And then there are agencies that provide emergency services, and sometimes we can get people hooked up with those. So
So it's a daunting responsibility that you have when you're doing guardianships and the advice that you're giving, but it also must be really rewarding when you get someone taken care of. Let's talk
it's
about that.
very, very, when it works out well, when the right people are involved, when you're really making a difference in somebody's life, it's very rewarding.
Yeah.
Like, when a child is turning 18 and a parent is desperately afraid that all of a sudden they can't take them to the doctor anymore or talk to the doctor anymore, right? There's a huge sigh of relief when they realize they're going to be able to continue taking care of this child that they've been raising. So, that's very rewarding to say, well, we got the guardianship and now you can keep, helping in school and talking to teachers and doing all of those
Oh my
things.
gosh, that was infuriating. And it wasn't even a guardianship thing when I was paying the bills for my son to go to college and I couldn't find out what his grades were. I couldn't find out anything for him. And they said the only way you could do that is if your son signs a document giving you authorization. So I go to my son with the document and say, are you going to sign this? And he's like, well, why do I need to sign this? And I was like, I don't know. Why do I need to pay for it? And that really was the moving case is like, okay, fine. And he signed the document. I was flabbergasted, never thought about that,
So,
because I
having nothing to do with guardianship,
none.
but a lot to do with parenting.
Yeah.
One one of the services that my office provides is a college plan, and I
Yes.
strongly recommend before kids go off to college that their parents encourage them to have a power of attorney and a healthcare proxy. You don't necessarily need anything more than that,
Yeah.
but you want, in an emergency, you want the doctor calling you
Yeah.
as emergency contact, and you want to be able to talk to the doctor or the hospital when they're away at school.
And have access to them, being able to
Yeah.
show up and have access to your child. I know that they're, 20 or 19 years old, but hello, in our heads, they're 5. They will
They're
forever be
5.
5
There
in our
will
heads.
always be 5. And the
That's
power
right.
of attorney is so important because once they turn 18, like try calling the bursar's office and saying, I have to pay the bill,
You
and
can't.
no luck. You got to get your kid.
Yeah.
You got to
Yeah.
get
So
your
that's,
kid involved to do that.
yeah,
So,
it's funny because all bursars office have that document that allow your child to sign that
yes,
over to give you that right. And I was like, you want me to pay the bill? Got to give me the right. So it was very persuasive argument, I would say. So
try tracking your try tracking your kid down their freshman year of college when they're enmeshed and finally being independent. Say, hey, I need you to go sign a document.
yeah, well, that's why I did it before, we dropped them off. So
Yes.
that was a good thing to do because I learned it in what do they call it? Orientation in August before we brought them up. And I was like, see this document? We're going to talk about
Right.
it. So
It's so important because, you know, we can laugh and everything about the bursar's office and not being able to see the grades and stuff. But, if there's a serious medical condition,
yeah, yeah. So I
while your
love that.
child is over 18, you absolutely want to be able to call the doctor and speak to them. And you're going to need a healthcare proxy to do that.
So I'm a take action success coach, as you're very well aware.
Yes,
What would be an action that families can take regarding guardianship right now if they felt that they had a loved one who was in need of it? What's the first thing they should do?
Okay, so if you think you have a loved one in need of a guardianship, right, you want to contact an attorney who has a specialty in guardianship. It's a little bit like will writing. Like I find that people will go to the attorney that did their closing and ask them if they write wills. And a lot of attorneys will write a will, and it might be a fine will, but I've been doing this for more than 25 years. So sometimes a little bit more than that goes into it. And there are attorneys who will take on a guardianship, not fully understanding the nuance of it. So you want to make sure you speak to an attorney who has a specialty in guardianship.
Yeah, because you don't want a foot doctor doing heart
Oh,
surgery on you.
exactly.
So
So you want to have an attorney who's going to listen to you, but also tell you the reality of the situation. Because in those most difficult cases, sorry about that, in those most difficult cases, it's really important that my clients understand not just what we can do, but what we can't do.
100%. And
Yeah.
I think that's even more important of the what we can't do. Jackie, you're always so good. There's another episode with Jackie Cara, an earlier one where we talk about wills and trusts and pour overs. Hey, I remembered it. The oops clause.
You did.
See, I remembered. I listen when you talk. I'd love to have you back, talk more about other things. You're so informative and so good at expressing it. Thank you so much for today.
Thanks, Lorianne. It was great to see you. I'd love to come back.
Absolutely. That's fabulous. Thank you for joining us today on Healthy Lifestyle with Lorianne. I hope we earned the privilege of your time. As usual, I want to thank our guest, Jackie Cara, for coming on today and helping us learn more about guardianships. And also look for our show next Saturday, as always, at 3 p.m. on JVC Broadcasting and iHeartRadio. Until next time, I am Coach Lorianne, America's #1 Take Action Success Coach and Strategist. Let your dreams be bigger than your fears and let your life be filled with joy. See you next time. Thanks, Jackie.